Imagine you are sitting in an airport, hundreds of people around you, announcements, footsteps, suitcase rolling across the floor, phones ringing, children talking, coffee machine steaming. Your brain is surrounded by information, and yet you are barely conscious of most of it. Then, from somewhere behind you, someone says your name. Immediately, your attention moves. Out of hundreds of sounds, one sound became important. Now imagine something different. You are driving peacefully when suddenly a vehicle swerves towards you. In less than a second, your entire internal world changes. Your attention narrows, your body becomes alert, your heart responds. Everything irrelevant disappears. For that moment, there is only one thing: the threat. And hidden inside these ordinary experiences is one of the most powerful truths about the human mind. Information does not influence you equally. Some information enters quietly, some disappears completely, and some information gets emotionally highlighted. Once that happens, the brain treats it differently, which raises an uncomfortable question. If someone understands how to control what captures your attention and what you feel while paying attention, how much easier does influencing you become? In the previous episode, we explored why fear sells. But fear itself is only part of the story. Fear works because emotion changes attention. And attention matters. Because before an idea can influence you, your brain must first select it from everything else. Think about your life today. You are surrounded by more information than any human being in history could consciously process. Messages, advertisements, videos, emails, podcasts, headlines, conversation or notifications, images, options. Your brain cannot deeply process all of them. So something must decide what enters, what gets ignored, what matters. And this is where attention becomes incredibly valuable, because controlling attention is often the first step towards influencing thoughts. Imagine a stage. Inside a dark theater, thousands of objects are sitting on that stage. But there is only one spotlight. Whatever enters the spotlight becomes visible. Everything else remains in darkness. Your attention works somewhat like that spotlight. Really, reality contains far more than conscious awareness can hold at once. So, your brain selects, and emotional significance is one of the things that can grab that spotlight. This is why a crying baby captures attention. An angry face captures attention. Your own name captures attention. A possible threat captures attention. A sexually attractive image may capture attention. A sudden movement captures attention. Something deeply meaningful to you captures attention. Emotion says to the nervous system, look here. Now, this is important. Emotion is not the enemy. Without emotion, human learnings would be very different. Emotional significance helps the brain decide which experiences deserves greater priority. A birthday you barely cared about may disappear from memory, but one humiliating sentence spoken 20 years ago can sometimes remain remarkably vivid. Why? Because the emotional brain effectively marked the experiences. This matters. Research on emotional memory has repeatedly shown that emotional arousal can influence both attention and memory formation, with the amygdala playing an important role in how emotionally significant experiences are encoded and consolidated. But notice what that means psychologically. Emotion does not merely make you feel. Emotion can influence what you notice, what you remember, and therefore what you may later use to understand the world. Let me give you a simple example. Imagine two teachers teaching the exact same lesson. Teacher 1 walks into the classroom, opens the textbook, and says, "Today we will study the amygdala." Teacher 2 walks in, turns off every light, places the mysterious box on the table, waits silently, and then says, "Inside this box is something your brain was designed to fear before you even understand why." Same subject, completely different state. Which classroom is now paying attention? That is the power of emotional framing. Before information entered, attention was prepared. This is something storytellers have understood for thousands of years. Long before neuroscience laboratories existed, great communicators understood that facts alone rarely move human beings. Stories do, mysteries does, danger does, love does, conflict does, hope does, loss does. Because information wrapped in an emotion become harder to ignore. This is why a static may be forgotten, while a story illustrating that static stays with you for years. Not because stories are automatically more truthful, but because stories make information experiential. And here is where influence begins to become powerful. Suppose I want you to remember an idea, I could simply state it, or I could attach the idea to fear, to aspiration, to belonging, to shame, to hope, to identity. Now, this idea is no longer just information, it has emotional weight, and emotionally weighted information competes differently for attention. Think about advertising again. A sports shoe company could say this weighs 247 grams. Information. Or it could show an exhausted athlete training before sunrise, failing, returning, bleeding, continuing, finally crossing the finish line while a voice says, "Become the person who doesn't quit." Suddenly they are not selling footwear, they are attaching a product to identity, determination, courage, transformation. And once emotion becomes attached, the object itself can begin carrying some of that meaning. This is conditioning, not in the dramatic sense of someone controlling your mind with a remote control. Conditioning is much more ordinary. Two things repeatedly become associated, and eventually one begins activating something related to the other. A smell brings back childhood, a song brings back a relationship. A hospital corridor creates anxiety, a particular notification sound makes your hand reach towards your phone. Before you consciously decide to move, the stimulus appears. The learned response follows. The learned response follows. And sometimes the response becomes so fast that consciousness arrives after the behavior has already begun. Try something. Imagine hearing the notification sound you receive most often. You don't even need your phone, just imagine it. Did some tiny part of you want to check something? That is the fascinating thing about conditioning. The object itself does not contain the behavior. A sound is only a sound, but experience gave the sound meaning, and meaning gave the sound power. Now combine the three elements: attention, emotion, conditioning. Attention, emotion, and conditioning. Attention says, look. Emotion says, This matters. Conditioning says when this happens, respond like this. That combination is extraordinary powerful, and you experience it every day. Consider a child who raises their hand in class, they answer incorrectly, the class laughs. Emotion enters, embarrassment, the body becomes hot, the face changes, the heart responds. The event lasts perhaps 15 seconds. But now, speaking publicly has become associated with humiliation. A month later, the teacher asks another question. The child knows the answer, but the hand remains down. Why? The classroom changed, the question changed, the day changed, but the association survived. The brain learned something, not I gave one incorrect answer, but perhaps visibility is dangerous. And if that association is strengthened across years, one day the same person may enter a boardroom with extraordinary ideas and remain silent. Then say, I am just an introvert. Maybe, but maybe you are looking at conditioning, wearing the clothes of personality. This is why I want us to be careful with the word hacked. Your brain is not a computer waiting helplessly for someone to type commands into it. Human influence is more complicated than that. People differ, context matters, prior beliefs matter, critical thinking matters, suggestibility differs between individuals. But there are predictable features of human cognition that makes influence possible. Attention is limited, emotion changes priority. Association creates learning. Expectation shapes interpretation. Familiarity can affect preference. Social context influence judgment. None of these mechanisms make you weak. They make you human. The problem begins when someone understands those mechanisms better than you understand that they are operating inside you. Imagine walking into a supermarket. You believe you are simply choosing cereals. But around you, years of behavioral science, design, marketing, pricing, psychology, and attention engineering are already at work. Eye level placement, packaging, brand familiarity, words such as natural, premium, limited edition, doctor recommended, family size, music, lighting, color, price anchors, social proof. You still have choice, but choice is happening inside an environment that was designed that distinction matters. Freedom does not mean absence of influence. Freedom means recognizing influence while you choose. Now, take this beyond buying. Imagine someone repeatedly tells you you are the responsible one. At first, it sounds like praise. Then you begin behaving accordingly. You never ask for help. You carry everyone. You feel guilty resting. Eventually, being needed becomes part of identity. Years later, you are exhausted. But you cannot stop. Why? Because saying I need help now conflicts with the identity you were rewarded for performing. Attention, emotion, conditioning. Again. Or imagine a child repeatedly praised only when they come first. Highest marks, love, winning, celebration, achievement, approval. Slowly success becomes associated not with curiosity but with worthiness. One day that child becomes an adult who cannot enjoy achievements because every achievement must immediately be replaced with another. People call them ambitious, maybe, They are. But perhaps ambition has become the behavioral expression of an older emotional equation. If I achieve, I belong. This is why an influence rarely looks like influence. It often looks like identity, preference, habits, personality, choice. And this brings us to one of the most important questions in the neural identity code. What happens when an emotional experience occurs while your attention is completely captured? The source material behind this chapter describes this as a moment when information may move past a ordinary analytical resistance and become more suggestive. Hypnosis has also historically explored this relationship between focused attention, expectations, suggestion, and responsiveness. But let us remove the mythology. Hypnosis is not mind control. A hypnotist cannot simply erase your values and take possession of your brain. Modern research treats hypnotic responsiveness as a complex phenomena involving focused attention, suggestion, expectation, and large individual differences. So, when I use the phrase opening the subconscious, I want you to understand it as a metaphor, not as a trapdoor. Inside the brain, what we are describing is a shift in the conditions under which information is processed. And you do not need formal hypnosis. For this to matter, have you ever become so emotionally involved in a film that for 90 minutes you temporarily forgot that you were sitting in a room, you knew intellectually that the actors were acting, you know the music was composed, you knew the story was constructed, and yet you cried? Why? Because knowing something is fictional does not prevent the nervous system from participating in the experience. That is extraordinary. A screen made of pixels can alter your heartbeat, your breathing, your tears, your muscles, your anticipation. That is how responsive human experience can be to meaning. Now imagine meaning being used deliberately: a political speech, a motivational event, a religious ceremony, a sales presentation, a movie trailer, a charity appeal, a courtroom argument, a parent speaking to a child. The communicator chooses where your attention goes. Then what emotion surrounds the information? Then what meaning you are invited to attach influence. And its most fundamental level often follows that architecture. Here is a metaphor. I want you to remember, imagine your mind is a house, attention is the first door. Emotion is the person saying this visitor is important. Conditioning is what happens when that visitor comes back often enough that eventually they no longer need directions. They know exactly where to go. That is why repeated emotional experiences can become powerful. But repetition itself deserves an entire episode. And that is where we are heading next. For now, I only want you to understand the doorway, because once you recognize the doorway, you start seeing it everywhere. Don't miss out. Attention, only three left. Emotion, everyone is buying it. Social influence, act now. Behavior, or people like us don't do that. Attention, identity, emotion, conditioning, or if you really loved me, attention, guilt. Behavior, different sentence, same nervous system. Now let us bring this into something deeply practical. How do you protect yourself not by becoming cynical, not by assuming everyone is manipulating you, not by becoming emotionally numb, and certainly not by trying to eliminate influence. You can't. Influence is everywhere. Instead, you develop meta awareness, the ability to notice what is happening inside you while it is happening. Imagine someone says something that immediately makes you angry. Usually, anger becomes the experience, but meta awareness says, interesting, my body changed. Someone shows you an advertisement that makes you insecure. Instead of immediately buying, you notice, interesting. This message created lack. A headline terrifies you. Before sharing, you notice, interesting. Urgency appeared before verification. That one word, interesting, creates psychological distance. And distance gives you analytical mind time to return. This is a principle I have repeatedly seen in coaching, communication, and therapeutic work. When people are completely inside an emotional state, the emotion looks like reality. But the moment they become the observer of the state, something changes. The fear is still there, the anger may still be there, the urge may still be there. But now there is also awareness, and awareness creates choice. So I want to give you a simple TNIC framework. When something strongly captures you, remember three questions. First, what has my attention? Not what am I thinking? Ask, what captured me? Second, what am I feeling? Fear, desire, shame, belonging, urgency, hope. Third, what response is the feeling pushing me toward? Buy, click, agree, attack, withdraw, share, obey, prove. Once you can see attention, emotion, response, you begin seeing the architecture behind influence, and something fascinating happens. The message may remain persuasive. You may still buy the product, you may still agree, you may still act, but now you are participating in the decision instead of merely performing the reaction. The TNIC movement. Listen carefully. The easiest mind to influence is not an unintelligent mind, it is an unaware mind. Intelligence does not automatically protect you from influence. Education does not automatically protect you. Success does not automatically protect you, because influence does not always enter through logic. Sometimes it enters through what captures your attention, what moves your emotion, and what your nervous system quietly learns to associate. Your greatest protection is not knowing everything, it is noticing what is happening inside you. And perhaps this is the deeper meaning of consciousness. Not having no programming, not having no emotional responses, not living beyond influence, but becoming capable of witnessing the mechanism before the mechanism becomes identity. Tonight, try one experiment. Do not change anything. Scroll normally, watch television normally, talk to people normally, but observe every moment when something strongly captures you. Pause. Ask, what has my attention? What emotion just appeared? What is this emotion inviting me to do? Don't judge the answer, just notice it. Because the moment you can see the mechanism, you have already changed your relationship with the mechanism. Perhaps your brain is easier to influence than you once imagined, but that is not the threatening realization. The threatening realization would be living your entire life without ever noticing what has been influencing it. Because your mind will always learn your attention, will always select your emotion, will always matter your nervous system, will always from association. The question is not whether you will be conditioned. The question is whether conditioning happens completely unconsciously or whether you eventually become conscious enough to participate in what your brain learns next. And now we arrive at the mechanism that turns a message from something you merely heard into something that begins feeling true. Why can an idea that initially sounded ridiculous begin feeling normal after enough exposure? Why does familiarity sometimes masquerade as truth? And how does repetition strengthen belief even when no new evidence appears? In next episode, we explore why repetition changes beliefs. Because one emotional moment can capture your mind, but repetition can teach it what to believe.